Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 100 Ways to Make 100K, the show where we're on the hunt to find 100 different ways to make 100 grand in a month. Can't wait to introduce you to our next guest. He goes by the name of Bern Grush. Now, put this into perspective. He's been an entrepreneur since longer than I've been alive. And he started his first company in the 80s and grew that magnificently, and now has transitioned it into a meaningful life. He's at the point now where he's introducing standards and rolling them out across the world for something that's going to impact us all. Robots. I can't wait to introduce you to none other than Bern Grush.
I'm Bern Grush, and I have been involved since my early 20s in a whole string of usually technical type of business and work. They have ranged from working with satellite data. These are satellites that photograph the Earth, writing software for those images, for example. In fact, if you've ever seen any of the kinds of imagery that are used for automated vehicles today, that's the kind of imagery, that's the kind of activities we were doing with software from back at that time. This is from the mid 70s to the early 80s. I have worked in financial companies, managing their paper flow. But this is, again, back with images. This is where we're scanning images and storing them, for example. Created a small device to go into a vehicle that would measure your use of the road so that we could do something which a lot of people don't like, called road pricing, which is charging people for the use of the road without all the gantries that you see. When you go onto for example, you go onto the highway, which you might have a device in your car that detects that you've entered that highway to pay a toll. Most people have seen those. What we did was we internalized that inside the vehicle so that you could also use it for parking payment, which was hugely convenient because you didn't have to get out and pay for the parking. You could simply park your car and walk away. And when you came back, it would turn off. You didn't have to cancel anything or anything like that. So that was very, very convenient.
These are really cool technologies. Yeah, what did these, like a lot of these applications that you described sound like they're being used today, but what were they like in the 70s?
So that last one I spoke about, that didn't come about until, I'm going to say, the late 90s.
Okay.
That's much later. And that was around for about 12 years. We had done some work, for example, in Holland. In that case, that country had decided to remove all their tolling systems and use only in-car tolling systems, but for all of their roads, not just some of them. And very interestingly, what happened there, we were on the verge of a very large contract. It was on the order of $6 or $7 million. And that was ended because President Obama decided to have a surge in Afghanistan and reached out to all of America's partners in that war, included Holland. Holland agreed, and that prime minister lost his government over that issue.
Wow.
And as soon as he lost his government, then the minister of transportation was no longer, and so that contract was ended.
Holy smokes, dude.
So I almost made a lot of money, not in one day or a week, but in a very short period of time. It would have been in a year.
Wow.
But I didn't.
Okay.
It came to nothing.
Well, so let's backtrack. I want to kind of go back to the start, and I would love to hear your story and how it kind of unfolded, because I was doing a little bit of digging, and it said you started your first company in the 80s.
So the first company, I joined a company, and there was a breakup among the partners in that company, and I became a partner for the partner that survived, and that was from 82.
82, okay.
So I'm gonna
this is
try to pinpoint that date exactly, but it was around 82.
Wow.
And that was the company I mentioned that was doing the work with the satellite data.
Okay.
And that company's still around, actually.
Wow.
Which is
what were they doing at the time? Like I know you mentioned satellite data, but is this just taking pictures for like everyday maps?
So almost everyone has seen and probably used things like Google Streets View or Google Earth.
Okay.
And when you're using those systems, you will see, as you zoom out, you'll see what looks like, and it is, a satellite photograph of the Earth. They're actually not a photograph as in a snapshot. They're actually scanned. There's scanners that are on the satellite, and they scan back and forth over the surface. creating an image.
Mm.
At the time, I'm talking about the late 60s when
Okay.
these first satellites went up. They were called Earth Resource Technology satellites.
Okay.
And the resolution of them, in other words, what's known as the spot size, was like 50 or 60 meters. In other words, if you think of your camera and the resolution of your camera that shows like hairs and pores on the skin, that's a very, very fine resolution. But these satellites were 50-meter resolution. So one single pixel represented 50 meters. So you can
Wow.
imagine how terribly
Inaccurate.
it would look out of focus. There's a term called alias, but anyway,
Yeah.
It was very, very, very low resolution.
So we would call that low resolution now, but at the time,
well, incredibly low resolution. Well, that was a big deal
yeah.
at the time. Well, you could map rivers, but you couldn't map crops as well unless it was a huge, huge field.
Mm-hmm.
Because what my software did, the software that I wrote did, is it would go into those images and would classify what was in the image.
Mm.
We would take an image and we would do something called training. Again, why am I tying it to what happens in cars today?
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing now. There's a bridge between the two. You hear that, for example, with AI systems, there's training data. We train the system to learn something. You may have seen very recently that Elon Musk said that he is using data from many tens of thousands, probably many more, I don't know the exact number, of car trips and using that to train the AI to recognize what to do and so on. So we were doing that back in the late 60s, early 70s, and we would take data. And for example, I would look at an image, and because I knew what was in the image, because somebody had gone out to the field to see what was in the image and would say, okay, that's a field of corn. That's a field of beans. That's a river, and that's this is an urban area. And we would train the machine to recognize what those were, and then we would take another image from a different place, and then we would ask the machine to tell us what was in that image.
Wow.
And that was from the 70s. Now it was inaccurate because the resolution was very poor.
Yeah.
And there was lots of reasons for the inaccuracies. It's a little bit boring for all of that, but that's the kind of work that we were doing. And I did that for 8 or 9 years, and then I left to go to the other side of imaging. So that was analyzing what was in an image.
Huh.
And I left and I went to a company. It was called Alias Research at the time. It then became bought by another company. And what that company did was it generated image. It created imagery.
Wow.
It's the other side of the other side.
Wow.
And I had no clue.
Huh.
Anything about that because all of my training was in analyzing it. I could tell you what was in an image, but I couldn't create one. I didn't know the math to create one. So I was actually mishired.
Okay.
But it was very, very interesting. I learned a lot in that period of time.
Yeah. What goes, like when you think about some of the lessons, when you say I learned a lot at that time, what were one of the things that kind of sticks out to you?
Well, I learned the whole video creation industry.
Okay.
When you see for example, one of the things that I did is I went to the very first Pixar movie.
Wow. Because
Pixar was a brand new company. It was like a few months old when I joined the company called Alias. And so I had gone to the very first one. The little lamp bouncing around was one of the first ones.
That would have been amazing. I could only imagine the awe that you would
that. It was awesome. I went to a conference. This would have been, I'm just going to say it would have been 80, I'm going to say 85 or 86. I don't know that I could be out by 2 years.
Okay.
I went to a conference in California where that was shown, and there must have been 20,000 people in the auditorium, and we were screaming with joy at this. It was so incredible. This is very commonplace now.
Wow.
We are unimpressed with those now because all films can do that now. In fact, we're doing much, much more than that.
Yeah.
I remember being there. The promise was in a few years, it's like you heard in 2017 that we would have a self-driving car in 2018, and we don't. Well, you heard in 1985 or 6, whatever year that was. Next year, we won't need actors in films anymore because our filmmaking will be so good that we can. Now you see it now. Yeah. You see the fake videos now.
Yeah.
That was promised in '86. This is 2003. Look at the gap between the hype and what happened. And we're going to make full videos and you won't be able to know the difference between
what's real and
the actor and what's not.
Hmm.
And that was what was promised back then.
Wow.
It took us this long to get there.
Took a little bit of time.
It took a little bit of time. Anyway,
Yeah.
I left that industry.
Yeah. So was this the first time that you made 100 grand in a year?
I did in that year for sure.
What?
I
Okay.
did that. By now I had done that a couple of times in 1 year.
That's crazy because like that's $1980, right? This is nothing compared to today. So what?
Yeah.
Like I can only imagine like, what where were you living at the time? What types of things were you doing?
Well, at the time I was traveling a lot.
Yeah.
Vacations.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. It's easier to spend it than to make it. It doesn't matter how much you make. You make 100 a year, 100 in a month. Most people are foolish and tend to spend what they've earned.
Yeah.
I don't know. Most of us. I've known one person who didn't do that and is now a multimillionaire and never spent any of it.
Still,
still today. These are very rare people.
Yeah.
But most of us spend what we have.
Huh.
One of my best friends, same thing, made a lot of money. He was making a couple $100,000 and he was a salesperson and spend every cent as he went through. So a very major lesson is one thing is to be able to earn, and I'm saying earn steadily. It's not important to have, 100,000 in one day or in 1 week. What's important is to earn what you can and to somehow invest it or save it, some of it wisely. Yes, you need to go on vacation. You need to enjoy yourself. You need to have, perhaps a nice car, but it's so easy to spend every cent you make.
Yeah.
I remember I would go with my then wife. We'd go on vacation. Nothing was, we just say, okay, we'll buy that. We'll buy that. We'll buy that. We come home with lots of things. And then the relationship went the way it went. And then all that stuff went to an auction. And you think about that when you, and all of those $100,000 years and months
gone to an auction
are gone to nothing.
So what was driving you at the time? Like you're probably fascinated, we talk about things now and we're just fascinated by the technology. What types of things were fascinating you back in the 80s? So at this time you're what, 30s or so? You're like 30 years old.
So good Lord, I can't do the math quickly enough.
That's okay.
So I was in my 40s.
Okay.
By then,
Yeah. What types of things were like, I wasn't around.
Well,
then, right?
I was so focused on the work that I was doing that anything that had to do with imaging technology, both sides of it, generating imagery, as in animated films, and analysis of imagery was always fascinating for me. And part of my personality is to become sort of obsessed with those things and spent all of my time and energy in reading and activities and so forth. It actually, here's the bad news, that actually destroyed my first marriage.
Really?
It was like no attention being paid, no time to family or relationship. It was all about that work.
And was it for the outcome of the work or just the fascination of the work? Like, what do you think drove you there?
I don't know. It's my personality is to become so absorbed and so taken in by whatever the work that I'm doing. And I also happen to be sadly a perfectionist in which I would rework until everything was worked. And that, by the way, is why that company's still here, because the fundamentals that were based then were done really well.
Wow. And what were some of those fundamentals? So this is the imagery company. What company is this, by the way? If you could
the
say.
name of that company, I'm going to tell you today's name is called PCI Geomatics.
Okay.
That's what's still around. It had different names through various phases, but it's now called PCI Geomatics.
Yeah.
The names changed because it acquired another company and another, and so on. There's acquisitions that go on, because that company actually started, back in the early 80s. So,
and so when you make a company, or when you become a partner in a company and you instill fundamentals that make it survive 40 years, what types of things do you think?
Yeah, well, in that case, it has to do with something called software architecture. So you may appreciate, if you have a very, very complex software system, there are design elements to that. If you're not a software engineer yourself, what does that mean? Well, there's ways that code is managed. There's way that code is structured. There's way that code is organized. There's ways that code is cascaded. There's all sorts of things. I'm trying to just keep it
It's okay.
simple, but there's all sorts of things that make it easier to maintain, easier to change. So you can appreciate, as an example, you get a new iPhone. What you may not know is that your new iPhone has had some amount, possibly a lot or possibly a little, of restructuring of the software before you got your new iPhone.
Okay.
You may also have heard that the most recent, I don't know, the most recent or the second most recent version of the Tesla software has apparently been, quote, restructured. I don't know what that means for that company, but I understand that it was done in a certain way, and whatever way you do anything, and however you build a house, it has limitations for renovation. However you build a company, it has limitations for what it can achieve. However you build software, it has limitations to how you can modify it. Somebody says, oh, can you make your software do something? So, that's really difficult to do that because of the way I blah, blah, blah.
Originally set it up.
And so on.
The way that my bank account's set up can't really do that. I understand what you mean.
Like that. So when I arrived at this particular company that I ended up being a partner and part owner of, the software that was being written was just being written by 6 different people under 6 different regimes independently. There was no organization of how that was done. The reason was, way back in the 70s, software architecture, software engineering was quite new. It existed in the university, but out in industry, it was very new because the world was about hardware. That company, all of its investment was to build a piece of hardware, which I had no clue what that was because I'm not a hardware person. So what happened is when I came in, I saw that it was very poorly structured. I'm a systems engineer by training, software systems engineer by training. So what I did was I reorganized it. And as I was reorganizing it, I learned more and more about better and better organizations of that software. So I ended up, and this might sound bizarre, I have to remind you that way back in the early 80s is before the Windows that you're aware of. Like the screen that you have had your whole life is called a bitmap screen, in which it's refreshed with whatever imagery and so on that's on it. Way back when I started, it was all just characters. You see
like a DOS, like a DOS type of system.
Yeah, before DOS.
Wow.
What matters when you're in the software domain, if you structure something very carefully, you have flexibility. It's easier to update. It's easier to manage. You always, always, always need to manage software. There's nothing, you can't write a piece of software and it stays forever. Like you build a deck on your back of your house. What does it look like after 5 years?
Not the same way that
that's not what happens to software. Software needs maintenance for other reasons. The hardware will change. There'll be a connection to a new subsystem, for example. I just give you a prime example of concern for, I'm bringing you back to automated vehicles now. Just this morning, I read that automated vehicles, the ones that we don't have yet, imagine that in a few years, the promise is that you're going to be able to buy a vehicle that drives itself everywhere. Let's say that happens. If that happens, that software needs to be maintained. Just like your iPhone, how often does your iPhone update? Every week, every 2 weeks? Update tonight before you go to sleep. What's going on? Security checks. Somebody has a new capability. That's what I mean by updating all the time. If you have a very poor organization of that software, those are very expensive. You need huge teams of people to do that, and you have errors. Your automated vehicle has the same problem. So let's say you have an automated vehicle and you're about to and you get a notice, you're about to leave to take your car, and you have a notice, you need a software update. Should you go? Like, are you concerned about that software update? Is it a security update? Is something going to possibly go wrong on your trip? So I'll wait till tonight. Which you shouldn't have. But let's say I'll wait till tonight. And let's say something happened because of that, whatever that reason was. And you didn't update.
Interesting.
Who's liable?
It's a great question.
Even people in automated vehicles haven't been talking about those things. But the layperson who's not in software never thinks about those things.
One of my friends, I'll give you an example. One of my friends works at the Apple store. And every 3 weeks I call him with a problem with my MacBook and a problem with my cell phone. Shout out my guy Khalil. And the first question that he always asks me, are you updated? And obviously it's like I haven't updated since 6 updates ago.
Oh
Like, of
no,
course it doesn't
you're a
work,
bad
right?
boy.
And that's what he says, right? But I could see exactly what you're talking about. If I'm driving an automated vehicle and this thing says I need an update, like I better update that thing like ASAP.
Yeah.
You know, it's not really something that you could keep postponing and kicking down the can. So how do you build, that into the ethos of a company, right? Because there's so many like let's just keep it as simple as a process, right? Because that's ideally what a software is.
Yeah.
It's a script that's written and runs over and over and over again. To my understanding, that might be very high level or very inaccurate.
Some software runs like that.
Okay,
AI software doesn't.
and how does that run?
I'm not going to be able, I'm not going to be able to do
We're
that.
going to go on a tangent.
We're going to go on a serious
Yeah.
tangent.
So,
So
yeah.
some of the software is like that.
Okay.
The sort of the container software is like that.
Okay.
But the interior decision making, like why was that decision made?
Yeah.
Why does the car know that that object is okay to, how does the car know that's a puddle and can drive through it? Or how does the car know that's a cardboard box
Yeah.
that might be, but that I ought not to drive over?
Wow.
How does that software know that's a bicycle or that's a tree? Like how does so that's done with training data.
Yeah.
So in other words, there would be code that says, I see that, I want to categorize that. Okay, that's a bicycle.
Okay.
But how does it categorize it? So what is the database that says I can tell a bicycle from a person? So that's where training comes in. So what we do is we show, really simply, we show the machine tens of thousands of pictures of bicycles from every angle, with a person on, with a person off.
Okay.
Why I bring up bicycle is because cyclists who died, we were talking about it before we started our conversation, the cyclists who died in, I believe it was Arizona, in around 2018, from that was hit by an experimental car driven by Uber. And the problem was that software wasn't certain if it was a pedestrian or a cyclist from the categorization problem. But back inside the script part that you were talking about, it didn't say, if I'm not sure, stop. It said, if I'm not sure, keep trying to figure out. If you're about to hit, a puddle or a shadow, because shadows can be confusing for these cars. But if you're about to hit something like a plastic bag wafting across, it doesn't matter that you are waiting to the last second of the second. If you're about to hit a pedestrian pushing a bicycle that you're not sure, is that a bicycle?
Or pushing a stroller. Right.
Well, could have been.
Yeah.
Could have been. But the thing is, a person walking a bicycle, that doesn't look like a bicycle to the train because it wasn't sufficiently trained.
Understood.
So you can say, well, that was a training problem.
Yeah.
And we could agree on that. But we could also say it was a scripting problem. To your point, is because the software didn't say, if I'm not sure, stop.
Yeah. So is this some of the things that you're kind of fascinated by with the Urban Robotics Foundation?
The Urban Robotics Foundation is a new tangent.
Okay.
Is not concerned about the behavior of the software. It's concerned about deployment. In other words, let's stick with robotaxis, for example.
Okay, fair enough.
Because we've been talking about them. And we're going to imagine that all the problems that are going on now in San Francisco and Austin with robotaxis getting stuck and stopping for unknown reasons and blocking fire trucks, we're going to solve all that. Not we, but the industry will solve those things. I'm not predicting how long it will take them to solve it or how well they will solve it. They'll get addressed. They'll get solved. They'll get better. There will come a time, again, I'm not saying 2 years or 20 years. There will come a time where there will be a preponderance of automated taxis. We nickname them robo-taxis. So imagine that you go downtown here in Toronto, and instead of 60 or 80,000 cars that are roaming around Toronto at any one moment, I'm not counting the parked ones, I'm just talking about the ones that are jammed up at the intersections. Let's say half of those are robotic taxis, let's say, because that's what the projection is, that we're going to be having half of them be, we might be getting to. Some people say more, some people say less, but it doesn't matter. Half of them. Now, what that means is that all of those taxis without a driver have to stop and pick up people. The average trip is 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers. These are all just running around the city, trips, going shopping, going to work.
Yeah.
They have to stop and pick up somebody, and they have to stop and drop you off. Is it okay if they stop on the bicycle lane? Your Uber driver does it today because the Uber driver can check, nobody's around, no one's going to notice. Let me let the passenger out.
Yeah.
I personally have exited an Uber vehicle in the middle of an intersection because the intersection was blocked up. I just got out of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Like, that's not legal. It's not anything. That's a completely inappropriate thing to do. But we were stuck. So now I need to come and pick you. An robotaxi needs to come and pick you up.
Yeah.
Where should you stand to be picked? Should you stand somewhere that the robotaxi stops in the driving lane? That's what happens now. They stop in the lane. Well, let's say there's only 100. No one's going to notice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when there's 10,000, this is going to be an incredible problem because we don't have what's called an orchestration system to manage where does the car stop to pick you up. So I need to tell you, go to that spot. The car is going to pull off in a place where it's out of the drive and so on. So we've not solved that problem.
This is so cool because it's really like the evolution of imagery, right? Like this is the same sort of questions that you were probably asking. Well, I mean, slightly different application back from PCI days, right?
There's a relation. So we wouldn't. So this idea of orchestration, the idea of let me tell you an example of an orchestration system.
Okay.
So you see.
Okay.
An airport has. That's part of it. Sorry.
Yeah. Orchestration system.
Yeah, an airport. I'm losing my.
Is this the bags?
My words here. No.
Okay.
Landing strip.
Oh yes.
Runways.
An airport does have a runway. Yes. You're absolutely
Thank you.
right.
I couldn't remember the word runway. This is an age thing.
Okay.
So I'm pausing for a moment so you can take that part out.
Okay.
So I'm just going to back up a little bit. The easy to understand concept of orchestration is how we line up airplanes to land on the runways. So you're flying from Munich to Toronto, and you have a scheduled time to arrive in Toronto. And as you get close, you will be slotted into a time to land. So you're going to land at 6:12. Well, it turns out that there's been a slight delay, and now you have to land at 6:18 or however. So it may be, for example, if you're delayed enough, you may have to slow down so that you don't arrive too soon, or it's been postponed by 20 minutes. Maybe you need to circle the airport.
Okay.
And you circle at a certain radius so that you use up that 20 minutes, for example. So the orchestration system that makes sure that planes are actually landing separate times with enough distance between them.
Okay.
Air traffic control system is an orchestration system.
Okay.
So when you drive your car, the orchestration system is the stoplights and the stop signs and the white lines on the road that organize your car to be in the right place and not to be banging into other cars and staying in your lane. So same with the planes. Those are all orchestration systems. We don't have that for robotaxi parking. The robotaxi is orchestrated by lights and by lanes when it's driving, but it's not orchestrated when it's picking up and dropping off.
Interesting.
So your Uber driver is orchestrated when he's driving, but when he needs to let you off or pick you up, he makes do with the best way he can to get you in and out of his vehicle.
Wow. Not
okay on a robotic vehicle.
Okay.
I think you can appreciate how that would be kind of a mess.
Yeah.
How are they going to communicate with each other?
Wow.
So that's
these are interesting.
That's one of the things that we're working on.
Wow. So it's really cool because it's like you're inventing these rules for everybody to play in. You know, like it's almost like the procedures for autonomous vehicles, right? Like how to I'm curious how.
But I want to underscore only for pickup and drop off. Autonomous vehicles are a huge field,
and that's crazy because it's one small piece only for pickup and drop off. Right? Like there's so many small, intricate minutia, small details that have to go into that.
The makers of an automated, the people building automated vehicles are not concerned about pickup and drop off. But you know who is? Cruise and Waymo is now. Yeah. Because now that they're actually in business, they're finding themselves, where do we stop? Where do we pick up people? How do we be safe? You know, These are all things that are that are unresolved. But let me make it way worse.
Please, please.
Way worse.
Yeah, paint the picture.
We're going to have automated robots on the sidewalk.
Okay.
They can be security robots just running around doing a security patrol, like a police-like. There are cities already that have, the police departments have purchased, and they just do it. They're just strolling around a particular neighborhood. For example, they have in one city stopped graffiti because they can slip around to the places where graffiti is being created.
Okay.
And it spooks the
of course. I mean, like if a robot snuck up on you, if you're doing something on the side of the road, I'd get pretty spooked too.
Get out of there. Yeah. So that's one of the that's an extreme example.
Yeah.
But we're designing, not we, again, when I say we, the industry, we're designing robots to sweep, to pick up garbage.
Okay.
There's a robot out of Denmark that scrapes gum off the sidewalk that picks up cigarette butts. These are for example. There's robots that mow lawns, just like the Roomba robot vacuums your living room.
Your house.
The same concept, except it's much larger and it's got blades and it's mowing grass and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And when that robot is operating in the park by itself, just with the worker that's managing it, is one thing. But what if there's people in that park? Like, what if you are having a picnic with your family in that park?
Yeah.
What are the rules?
Yeah.
We're writing those.
Okay.
So we're essentially drafting an international standard that would be a model for regulations for the rules of the sidewalk.
Wow. So
let's go back to the sidewalk, a much easier example.
Okay.
How many robots can be on a sidewalk at once? How do they line up at the corner? Remember, they're competing with you. You are pushing a pram or dragging a wagon or whatever, or you're walking with your girlfriend and you're crossing the intersection and you're standing at the curb, at the little slope piece of curb that's textured for.
Yep. Right at.
So you're standing there, but there's already a robot there. Or should the robot back off and give you the space?
Yeah.
Or what if there's 6 robots?
And what if there's construction on that side of the sidewalk and it says the cross?
That's another aspect. No, I'm going to hire you.
Yeah, hey man,
your understanding.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting stuff, right?
So these are all things that are not important if there's only one robot. So you're on campus.
Yeah.
And there's 6 robots.
Okay.
And the campus doesn't have all the complexity of a city street.
So let me I don't mean to interrupt you, because you're really going right now. Like if you were in the booth right now, you'd be flowing, right? As the artist would say. But I'm really curious, how do you go about imagining all these possibilities? So let's say, for instance, right, like I'm running a shop. There's a bunch of people listening to this that run their own companies, right? And they've got team members that do something. Now, let's say, for instance, you run a business. It's just you doing one thing.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have to start adding team members. But there's limits to your system, right? What happens at 10 customers is different than what happens at 50 customers, is different than what happens at 100 and 1,000, et cetera, et cetera. Same sort of thing with robots. Okay, if we have one robot on the sidewalk, X happens. How do you walk us through, like, how you would go about even ideating what happens when you add scale and, like, there's got to be some line of questioning that you walk yourself down.
That's a really good question, and I'm going to tell you how I cheat that.
Okay.
I've been at this particular question, robots on sidewalk question, for 3 years.
3 years.
A lot of the things that I told you.
Okay.
One of the things I told you a few minutes ago is that just this morning I read, a certain thing about AI.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that.
Okay.
I'm writing a new book now, and I will include what I just found into that. So you might say, well, how did he figure that out? Well, in that case, that came from someone else. Let's go back to the beginning 3 years ago.
Okay.
I recognized that, gosh, if we're going to have robots on sidewalks, there's people with accessibility issues.
Yeah.
How's that going to work?
Yeah.
And I thought only about wheelchairs. And I know that not every place is wheelchair accessible.
Yeah.
Or even if it is wheelchair accessible, it's barely so. There's a lot of sidewalks just wide enough for a wheelchair.
Oh my gosh. You saw the wagon that we came in here with. The other day I was at one of the hubs for innovation in Toronto, and I had to walk around the whole building just to wheel my wagon up the ramp.
Yeah.
You know, like the amount of streets
Be
and
very fortunate for you and me. We're
that
not in
I'm in a
wheelchairs.
wheelchair, right? So
Yeah.
they even, and when you were talking about you got to build the infrastructure in a way that adopts and stays open to additional changes, right? When you were talking about the software on how it made PCI last for 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
right? Like, and building and managing your code in a way
Right.
that can attach new updates
Right.
to it, right? Like, how do you do that in a physical infrastructure?
How do you do that for a city?
Right?
Well, you do that by widening all the roads and disappearing the sidewalks and making sure that you have room for cars. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong program.
Wait,
wrong
cars?
program.
Why cars?
I know.
I thought we were talking about
I'm being sarcastic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
So now the question is the current, they're called accessibility guidelines.
Okay.
Every country, not every country. There are several. There's many countries without them, but the European Union has one. America has the ADA accessibility, the American Disability Act, the Canadian Disability Act. So there's multiple countries that have Disability Act that say, here's your rules, here's your maximum slope, here's what you do at the intersection, here's how your curb ramps are, here's how wide your sidewalk has to be, here's how high doorknobs have to be, on and on and on.
It's like building code, all sorts of code.
So I looked at that code, already written by someone else some while ago. Two things. I looked at that code and said, robots operating on sidewalks are at human speed and human weight. The robot weighs something like what a human weighs.
Okay.
It's not as tall as a human, but it kind of weighs the same. And it goes kind of as fast as a human. So they're human scaled. Gosh, they look like wheelchairs.
Yeah.
They're going to need the same constraints. So I started the standards work by saying, we need to have an infrastructure that looks like wheelchair infrastructure. Then I realized, what if it has to pass a wheelchair? Now I have rules that say that the robot has to get out of the way and that the wheelchair come through.
Yeah.
This is just me drafting what I think are sensible rules. These are not regulations.
No, these are just ideas at this point.
They're going into a standard. So I just want to say an international standard. A standard is a set of engineering descriptions.
Yeah. A
regulation is that puts it into law. It's a whole different issue. So in other words, a city council or the provincial ministry of transport, for example, could look at the standard that's being drafted and say, okay, we're going to adopt these parts and make those, we're going to add those parts to the, for example, in Ontario, the Highway Traffic Act. Now that's happened in Japan. Japan has changed their Highway Traffic Act to admit robots on the sidewalk, how fast they can go, how big they can be.
This is happening now. They've done this.
So that happened. I translated that about 6 months ago.
Wow.
From it was brand new. So it's now law in Japan.
Holy
Korea
smokes.
has done that. Estonia has done that. 20 U.S. states have bills, House bills, Senate bills that say you can have robots on sidewalks if the city says so, and if you do, they have to be this. They have to be this size range, the speed range. They have to have insurance like this, and they have to have lights like that and brakes and so on. So there's very, very minimal. It doesn't say how they behave. It doesn't say what side of the sidewalk. It doesn't say that they have to wait for somebody in a wheelchair. It doesn't say that they have to have sound for somebody who's deaf. My master's is in what's called systems design engineering.
Okay.
So what you hear me talk about orchestration is there's a field of study called operations research.
Okay.
It's like there's a little element called queuing theory. How things line up for something.
Okay.
Let me give you an example of failed queuing theory in every building you've ever been in, every public building you've ever been in.
Please.
Ever been to a concert and the lineup to the men's room is 4 meters long, and the lineup to the women's room is 100 meters long.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's queuing theory.
Okay.
What's the solution to that? I mean, you have 8 urinals in the men's room, and you have 8 toilets in the women's room, except that women take X times longer.
Yep.
We know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's say X is 3. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Well, then if you have 8 urinals for the men and the same number of women are attending, like if it's a sports stadium and there's 80% men, well, then you can balance that. So you need to know those things. How many of each? How long do they take? So you need to know how many facilities
Yeah.
you need.
Wow. When was the first time you were forced to solve a problem like this at scale? Because I'm getting to a point where my editors are getting backed up. You know, my shoots are getting backlogged. Managing certain tasks is becoming a little bit of a hassle.
Yeah.
Right? Like you get to this volume.
Well, you have the same problem.
I have the same problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, right? So when did you first experience this? You know?
Well, in real life, in like my example, but going to the theater. But when did I experience it? I
In a
solved it.
machine that you
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah,
running,
yeah,
right?
yeah. No.
Because you were running multiple businesses, and I'm sure these are problems that you bump into, right?
Well, every computer operating system
Okay.
has all of these problems, but I've never written an operating system.
Ah, okay.
So there's multiple layers of computing. I've only written at the very highest application level. Like
Yeah.
AI is an application,
Okay.
and like your financial system is an application,
Mhm.
or a word processor is an application,
Okay.
and all of those depend on
The
operating layers. And I've never worked down that layer.
Mm.
That's
That's next level.
hard. And networking. Like I, for example, can't figure out my passwords to my email because that's like a networking and security problem, and that's
Yeah.
not my area of domain.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
if you give me a queuing problem, I can solve that one.
Wow. This is so cool, man. You've got my mind going in all of these different places. I'm so appreciative for this
People
conversation.
don't understand. Computing has many, many layers.
Yeah.
It's not like hardware and software.
Mhm.
Software has many layers, and
Mhm.
any particular software element has many layers, but there's
Mhm.
many different flavors of those. So
Mm.
I'm telling you that the AI systems, for example, that are running in automated cars have layers that are not in, for example, a financial system or in a word processor. They're just not there.
Hmm.
They're not needed.
Wow. This is so interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's go back to your story. So, the PCI, well, now PCI, then it was a company that started with an A that did the Pixar stuff. What was that called again?
So that Alias is the company I worked for.
Yeah.
That was not a company I founded.
What happened
What
after
I do
that?
is I have a company for 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
and in the case of PCI,
Mhm.
it was sold, and I left,
Mhm.
and I took a job for a year.
Okay.
It was a break,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I got itchy after
You got bored. Eh? You
after
got bored.
six
You went on another
after 6
tangent.
months, and
Okay.
so I started another company.
Yeah.
And that company was called Imara.
Imara.
At last only a year and a half.
Okay.
It went up really rapidly. We made the cover of what was called Byte magazine. It went out of business before you were born, probably.
The
Byte
magazine or Amara?
Oh, both.
Both.
But Byte, I don't know if Byte magazine still exists,
Yeah.
but it's BYTE
Oh,
magazine.
Byte. Okay.
And Byte magazine was the, like, when laptops came out, the very first ones, the IBM 386. You don't remember these, but
No,
way
Bern, I
back.
don't remember these.
They were big things that sat on your. In fact, they had to sit on the floor beside your desk. They were
Okay.
before laptops, way before laptops.
Yeah. So they wrote about you.
Anyway, we made the cover of that magazine.
Wow.
So we
you
were
were on the cover?
not my picture, but
Oh.
our software, by our company was
Okay.
on the cover. Huge, rapid success. Very, very common thing that you get out. You have a great idea. You get funding.
Mm-hmm.
You generate something. You go to the trade shows. We were the darling of the trade show.
Mm.
Got the cover of the magazine, and ran out of money, and so we lost it.
Wow. How did you run out?
Warning
like,
number 2.
Yeah. How did you run out? Like what happened at the time? You know, like what were you guys trying to solve?
Well, there was 3 partners,
Okay.
and all 3 of us were engineers,
Mm.
and 2 of us had this. We're going to make the product perfect, which is not possible in software.
Yeah.
I thought it was because I was a perfectionist.
Mm.
You have to be perfect. And the third said, no, you got to get something, and you got to get it out there, and you got to get it tried. You got to try, fail. Don't.
Yeah.
We're never going to get off the ground.
Yeah.
So we went, and that's how we got to the cover of the magazines. It was great. We had so much attention. And then we quarreled about how we should pull back and make it perfect and get all the layers, get all the engineering right. And no, get it out, ship.
Just push and
Just
pull.
ship an empty
it.
box. Just ship this thing and so on.
Yeah.
So that was the conflict.
Mm.
The truth is somewhere in between.
Okay.
You do have to get your products out. You can't
Yeah.
wait 9 years because the idea is you have to get it out.
Yeah.
And you can't ship an empty box. You have to have something.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to get a minimum level of confidence. We now call it, this is 20 years later, we call it
MVP.
minimum viable product.
Mhm.
Like an empty box is not a minimum viable product.
Yeah.
But let me not be unfair. We were not shipping an empty box,
Mhm.
but we had zillions of ideas and it just wasn't fully structured. Like the deck wasn't finished, but you're going to have your party anyway.
Understood.
And that was going to be dangerous
Understood.
because it was nails sticking out, and you can see the analogy. Just not
100%.
not
It's not ready to party.
It's not ready. It wasn't ready to party.
Yeah.
And so that was like then
I mean, that's a big lesson right there, man. Like there's always like this dance between, is it ready? Do people need to try it? Like how
100%.
perfect can you get it, right? And this is almost like your standard or the foundation for growth. Like how much can you build it without actually receiving the inputs, right? Like how many of these, almost like the Waymo and Cruise situation, right? Like how ready for the road can they be if they don't try the road and realize, oh shoot, like there's a parking lane there.
Well, go back to, it wasn't Waymo, it was Cruise that had that problem.
Okay.
And the reason I'm cautious about that,
Yeah.
different companies
Yeah.
and different behavioral characteristics.
Mm.
They're both doing very important and hard and valuable and et cetera work.
Yeah.
One of them has, to my opinion, this is just an opinion,
Yeah.
just has behaved much better.
Okay.
And that's Waymo.
Mm.
But still, Cruise could not have found that problem unless they were out in the real world.
Yeah.
Unless they said, what would ever happen if 20 robots went down the same cul-de-sac at the same time? Have we figured that one out?
Mm-hmm.
If someone had said that,
Mm-hmm.
they could have sorted that out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think somebody thought of that.
Yeah, I think there's a.
But you find that out.
Yeah, I think in life there's a lot of questions that we don't ask until it's actually upon us. You know,
That's
like
right.
it becomes tough.
So in the end, and to defend the declining reputation of the robotaxi, it happens to be declining over the last months because of all of these issues.
Yeah.
You have to go out in the real world and try things.
Mm.
Like there's just stuff you are not going to find in simulation. And I'm going to tell you the most horrible story happened about, I'm going to say 3 days ago, maybe 4. A person was crossing the road, a pedestrian was crossing the road, apparently in a crosswalk, but I don't know that. They were crossing the road and they were trying to outrace the traffic. In other words, they didn't have the right of way. The cars had the right of way, and the person thought they could
Jaywalk.
I'm not going to use the word jaywalk because I didn't see the intersection.
Fair,
It could have been
fair.
in a crosswalk that wasn't ready. I don't know. But what I'm saying is they were crossing and trying to beat the traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And that pedestrian was hit by a drivered vehicle. A person driving a vehicle hit that pedestrian, flipped over the hood of that pedestrian, and slammed down right beside the car, exactly in front of a Cruise robotaxi.
Wow.
And it's the kind of thing that sounds like it was impossible not to hit this person. And I'm just telling you what was said in the newspaper.
Yeah,
I was not there. I
fair
do
enough.
not know the truth. It will be analyzed. You will hear a different version of it in 6 months when it's fully analyzed.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like the the human-driven car, and the sounds like they were close. Sounds like almost like the body was thrown under the robotaxi. It sounds like the robotaxi stopped very quickly, although there's 2 stories. Says it went 20 meters, says it didn't go, and so on. One of the stories is that the person was dragged for a distance, and so on. This is not something, this is a horrible, horrible, we call them edge cases.
Yeah.
Unexpected, like who would have ever written code for that,
Yeah.
and so on. This is deeply damaging to the industry.
Mm-hmm.
It's assumed that this robotaxi carries some fault, and you can see on LinkedIn, oh, they should have done this, they should have done this. These are all armchair analysts saying they should have done this.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's saying, "You tell me what Putin should have done."
Yeah.
Like,
it's
really? Do you know?
No, I don't have a
And so
clue.
we don't know that.
Yeah.
And so it's unfair that this sort of, I don't want to use the word evidence, but it's unfair that this
Scenario.
notion that the automotive companies are wrong or shouldn't
Mm.
that's a bit unfair. What is fair is to say that if you don't know how to handle the cul-de-sacs, if you don't know how to get out of the way of a fire truck, for example, then you should have a driver there to take over in these edge cases. Now that has been stated very clearly. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now the problem is there's the conflict. So the purpose of a robotaxi is to bring down the price of transportation. So you want to take the driver out.
Yeah.
But the purpose of having a safe vehicle is to not block. I mean, you say, well, there's no crash. Yeah, but you held up the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
The person in the ambulance has a heart condition. Every minute counts. And so the EMS services in San Francisco are saying we need not to be stopped by these,
mm-hmm.
and they are right.
Mm-hmm.
The emergency services are right,
mm-hmm.
but the car company said, well, we need to test,
mm-hmm.
and they're right.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer is keep a driver in there until you've sorted this out.
Yeah. So how do you know when you're ready to ship?
You've just asked the most important question. We don't. That's so we do our best, and
mm-hmm.
we want to see the instances dropping.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware that Tesla has had several accidents where a Tesla's gone straight underneath
like a truck or something.
A tractor trailer.
Crazy.
The tractor trailer pulls in front of the Tesla, crossing the road, and the Tesla doesn't see it when they're white. A white tractor trailer looks like, they say, looks like the sky, or it looks like a billboard.
I understand. So I got a drone, right? And sometimes when I take off, and like I'm lazy, right? So I'll sit in the car and drive it from the driver's seat. So I would take off from the hood of the vehicle or the roof of the vehicle, and then sometimes I'll land on the roof of the vehicle. Now when it's in a white car, it comes down and doesn't stop. So like it senses when it's close to the ground, and it has like a radar for landing. But if it's on top of a hood, it just keeps going, and then will hit the thing and
bounces off the hood.
Exactly.
So this is not an area that I understand. I don't know this. Like I don't know color theory, or if that is even something to do with. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you're running into the same problem. But so why Tesla? I didn't mention any other car company this problem.
Yeah.
Because Tesla took out LiDAR. Tesla now took out radar. It's used only image.
Mm.
And the argument is, and I'm not an expert.
And these are your images from PCI.
No, I wish.
Yeah.
Anyway, they
took out the LiDAR.
This has been going on now for about 4 or 5 years. So the very first one happened. Of course, it shears off the car and your head.
Mm-hmm.
It beheads the driver.
Gone.
And you're in the hospital for a long time. Anyway, no, it's a horrible accident.
Understood.
And the car shoots some long distance. Even the one that just happened in like a week or two ago, very recently. Mm-hmm. The body of the car, which is the major weight of the car, is it just takes off the top. Went along for
still going, right?
Like another kilometer.
Crazy.
Whatever, a long distance.
Yeah.
I don't know how far.
That's insane.
But anyway, you would think these things would be you would think that Tesla would focus on that problem and not permit that problem to happen again, but they haven't.
Interesting. The way that you kind of live your life, right? Like a lot of, like, it's not like I reached out to a lot of 75-year-olds, 74. You know?
That's okay. I'll take the year.
Yeah. It's not like I have conversations with many of them, right? But the few that I do have aren't necessarily open to new things like this. No. You know, like even some are in their 50s and they're like, oh, I'm not open to a podcast. Like, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Like that's completely
fine.
No,
I've been open to almost everything for a long time. Like not since I was really little, but for quite a long while.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. And I appreciate you taking the time to chat. So, Bern, you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a month?
I'm going to put that in. That's in one of the companies in the middle here. There was a company called Meta Concepts, and that actually grew nicely. We ended up growing to at peak to 50 people, and so it was that company was doing far more than that per month because of 50 people.
Yeah, I mean, like the payroll was probably more than 100 a month.
There were a few months where we were paying ourselves that.
Yeah,
I had a partner in that as well. It wasn't every month, of course, but there was a couple months like it. But why that happens is because there was large contracts and executed by multiple people, and certainly it's easy to achieve that with a team. A team like that.
Now, what type of things were you doing at the time?
We were writing systems that would scan images of financial documents.
Okay.
They were being scanned to capture and store for documentary purposes and for financial records purposes.
Wow.
In a sense, low-end technology compared to what I had been doing the years before with the satellites.
Yeah.
But it is more lucrative because it has a financial basis.
Yeah.
And what that financial basis is that it saved effort. So there was a processing cost. For example, when you went to the bank and had a transaction of some kind, and there's a paper record of that, there's a check, or there's a document for the whatever, like maybe you're purchasing mutual funds, for example, and there's a document for that and so on. And that has to be processed and stored and entered and all that sort of thing. So we automated that so as to save.
How did you start that? Because you're working on this like world-changing technology, and then all of a sudden you get to this point where you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna make mutual funds easier to sell.
No, it wasn't making mutual funds easier to sell. It was, so my first business partner back in that company that did the satellite work.
Yeah.
He said, "Can't you use this technology to automate office paper?" And when he said that, I knew the answer was yes, because we studied that back in school. I said that, I put it off. I didn't want to do it.
Yeah. Why? Because it was so boring, so basic.
That was my impression then, and I was so taken with what I was doing with the satellites. I was absolutely mad. I couldn't sleep. It was so exciting to do.
Yeah.
When that company was sold, and I went off, and I told you I went off to another company that was doing the image generation. After that, it was during that time when I met someone that said there's this enormous market for office documents, and I went, yeah, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
We did it, and that's the one that made the cover of the magazine, and
Byte.
that made the cover of Byte magazine as well.
Okay.
And that turned into another company after that called Meta Concepts, where we did that banking work. And so, one thing leads to another. I can show you the connection from all of these. It sounds like 8 different companies or 6 different companies, but there's actually, like, while there I learned this, and then when I got out I did that, and then when I did that, and so on. And so so it's funny that the connection with what I'm doing now, writing the international regulations for Sidewalk robots, sounds like nothing to do with any of that at all. Well, it turns out that after the software company that did the banking work ended, I said, you know what? I'm going to, like, every time I get into software, it blows up the previous. I mean, they were lucrative while they lasted, but one of them died in the .com bust in 1999. I said, I am fed up with software. Everybody I know that has a little piece of hardware that they really hit the nail with this thing, they do well. So I'm looking to do a piece of hardware. So then one thing led to another. I said, I want to have a little piece of hardware that when I have it in my car, it handles my parking for me. It knows where I'm at, and it pays it for me. And I hate paying for parking.
Same.
I hate the action of paying for it, the nuisance of paying for it. The one thing is you have to pay for parking.
Yeah.
Okay, well, suck it up. But the other thing is you have to get out, and you have to fool with your cards. You have to push a button, and it's raining, and you're holding your umbrella, and you're trying to put the money into the machine. It sucks.
Yeah, terrible experience.
I'm just going to make it so you can park. And by the way, I don't know how long I'm parking for. Should I pay for 2 hours, or should I pay for 1.5 hours? Yeah. I pay for 1.5 hours because I'm cheap. Oh my God, I'm late. I got a ticket. I'll pay for 2 hours because I don't want a ticket. Oh, I came to the wrong address. Have you ever done that? Yeah. You go out and you put $4 in the machine. Oh no, it wasn't, Smith Street. It was Jones Street. I'm in the wrong place. And what I want to do is I want to park. I want to pay for what I'm using. Yeah. And I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to deal with it. So I built that. No, I didn't build it personally. I built a team. I got investment. We built that.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's the same device that I told you the story about Holland. Sorry to mix these things all up. But
no, that's okay.
That's the same device. That's where I was going to be.
Wow.
stupid,
sounds like
stupid wealthy in a short time, but it didn't
Yeah.
happen either because of,
Hey man.
thank you, President Obama.
Hey, well, it sounds like you've just followed your curiosities
Yeah.
and solved your own problems time and time again. You know, the things that caused you a nuisance, you're like, let me invent something that's gonna solve this problem. And you know, some mixed with opportunities that you took. I'm interested, right?
Yeah.
So you're 74 now, and you've seen a lot of lives pan out. You know, uh, what are the lives of um, you know, in at 74, what types of things do you enjoy these days?
Well, I certainly I enjoy spending time with my little grandson. I have two grandsons, and I enjoy spending time with both of those. That's
Are they gonna believe you if you tell them you're a YouTuber?
well, Alex will.
Okay.
That's my older grandson.
All right.
He's 20, and but my little grandson, who's is a year and a quarter, will have no clue what I'm talking about.
No, yeah,
He still doesn't.
yeah,
So
that's
yeah.
super cool.
So those are certainly highlights.
Yeah. What a now when you look around, like, do you have a lot of other 74-year-old friends still, or do you like have like your old
No,
colleagues on Facebook
I learned
and
a
stuff?
long while ago that if all you have is people your age, when you get into your 70s and 80s, there are fewer.
Yeah.
And so I was told a long while ago, and it was actually in a personal development courses every year make a new friend who's 25 years old every year.
Wow. Okay.
So that you just have this gradation of friends. So I have in my area of work, most people are not retired yet, so I say the average age is like 50-ish, something like that. Yeah, I have my co-author John Niles is a couple years older than me, but most people that I know are younger. And I have a couple friends that are older, but mostly younger.
I'm curious what, like, you probably saw a lot of life pan out. So I already see some people and how their habits influenced them from high school until now. Some that did extremely well, some that didn't do so hot.
Yeah.
What are the type of habits and lives that like that you saw maybe around like your 20s and 30s, maybe 40s, that kind of panned out to what you would describe as a nice life at 70?
Habits that worked.
Yeah, the ones that worked.
Well, in my 20s and 30s, I had a lot of habits that didn't work. I was a heavy smoker.
Okay.
I spent about 2 years with a business partner doing a lot of drinking every day, sort of thing. And it was like at a table, and it was great conversations, but it was just it got to a point where it was negatively influencing my health. So it was negatives there. I'm going to say I didn't look at developing good habits.
Yeah.
And these are behavioral habits as opposed to, well, all habits are behavioral.
Yeah.
See how I'm going to tell you the best habit that I picked up, and I didn't pick this up until my 40s.
Please.
And the habit that I picked up is that I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I was very concerned, like hyper concerned. I know most people are somewhat concerned about what other people think about them.
Yeah.
But I was on the side of being really concerned about that. And so it made it impossible for me to speak, for example. Learning that other people's opinion of you is their opinion, and it's on them. It's actually not on you.
Yeah.
It took me, I wasn't until I was in my 40s till I realized that. So it was, I know that's not, which might not be what you're thinking of about a habit, but there's a habit of mind that says, I know what I want to achieve or accomplish, or I know how I want to think about this issue. I'll listen to what you have to say and see if that's going to influence me. But if it doesn't, I'm going to do and think how I want to, and I'm not concerned about what the other person thinks. That's a very big deal. It's the freedom in that is tremendous, and the opportunity to discover things that you might not otherwise have discovered is tremendous.
Yeah.
So
what things are you happiest that you did? You know, when you look back at some memories or, you know, some things that, you know, led you to where you are today, or, you know, some things that started by accident but have turned out to be fruitful. What types of things are you
Well,
happiest that you've done?
I'm so happy. I'm going to say proud. So
Okay.
first of all, I've had a very good life. I've been to a lot of places. I've tried a lot of things. I've known a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am quite comfortable in most circumstances socially.
Mm-hmm.
So all that's a huge positive. I've had a good life.
Yeah.
Um, I think I lost it again.
Yeah. Take your time. I was asking what types of things are you most proud of?
Yeah, no,
Hey.
I was switching from happy to proud.
Okay.
So what I'm happiest about is that I have done my best in all of the ventures that I've gone into.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud that some of them really worked out. Some of them didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm proud about that
Mm-hmm.
is that no matter what, I get up again.
Mm-hmm.
I say to my three children, it doesn't matter the mistake you've made. It just matters if you can get up off your knees when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm happy that I have that aspect of my personality.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that comes from actually, but I think I've been like that all my life. But I certainly have been like that since my 40s for sure.
Hmm.
So I'm proud and happy about that because I think without that, I don't think I would have been able to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying.
Yeah.
And what I do know is, again, both happiness and pride. I do know that the work I'm doing now is important,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not recognized yet because it's kind of too new and it's too obscure, and it's who would have wanted to spend time on that.
Yeah.
I'm willing and able to spend time on it. I'm actually fascinated with the problem, which is makes me a hyper nerd. But anyway, that's okay. But what I am finding out now is that I have meetings every month with members of this the Urban Robotics Foundation, and I have received several compliments by people that call me back and say, "I didn't understand how important this is. It's really important work you're doing."
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, very happy about that because that gets me out of bed every morning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really, in one sentence, I'm doing things that matter, or to the group or people that I work with. That's
Yeah.
that. What more can you ask for?
Hey, man. I think it's really important work that you're doing as well, especially it's the future that we all live in.
Yeah.
Now I met someone the other day. They were in they're a couple of years your junior, and I asked them.
In their 30s.
Yeah, like 2-3 years younger than you. Yeah, in their
Okay.
30s.
Thanks.
Okay, and I asked them a question that I thought was pretty cool, and then they remixed the question. So I'll ask you my original one, and then I'll ask you their remix. So, what do you wish that your kids asked you more about?
Huh. I have two answers for that. I like to be asked how things work because I get to show off, even if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Look,
yeah.
which I'm often.
The muscle that you like flexing, though. I understand.
Yeah, but I don't know. Because the reason I'm struggling is I have a son who's 54 and I
Grandson
have
is 20.
a daughter who's
Oh,
20.
wow. You have a daughter who's 20? Bern, you still got it, eh? My bad.
No. So
Yeah.
anyway, I have, she's
Do you have a
2002.
daughter and a granddaughter the same
She's
age?
21.
You have a daughter and a grandson the same age?
Well, there's a couple marriages going on here.
Okay.
So I have a son who's 54 with his son who's 20,
Okay.
and I have a daughter who's 27 and a daughter who's 21.
Wow.
So all three of my children are adopted. So
Okay.
that's how I do. That's how I have a 20-year-old.
Oh, okay.
Right. I like when my son talks about relationship things because we're both men and we can both talk about being married and what that means and how that works out. And those same conversations aren't possible with a daughter.
Hmm.
It's not because of their content. It's there's not the same view and concerns and empathy.
Mhm.
That's not there. I like when my daughters talk more about sort of social or cultural things. I like
Okay.
those kinds of aspects with them.
Hmm.
So that that's how the conversations work with them
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
compared to when they work with my son, because I see them differently. They live in different parts of the country, and so it's seldom that they're all together in the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question that he then remixed was, he goes, you should have asked what things I didn't get to ask my parents.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, that's
Wow.
crazy.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, I have stuff I would ask my parents now.
yeah.
Now that
Life
they're
has
over
done what
they're
life
over
has
100
done.
years old, and now that I understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
I lost my parents later after I appreciated them. I mean, I did not appreciate my parents when I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not proud of that. That's a big negative, and it's not uncommon, but I couldn't care less.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come around. It's like, wait a minute, this is my mom and dad,
Mm-hmm.
until I was, again, in my 40s.
Mm.
And so I was late in
Yeah.
that, a little bit late, decade at least. And it was only then, and my mom was already quite sick, that I realized then, and I realize now, that I have been a parent to two daughters recently. They're young compared.
My age.
They both of them were born after my mother passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife at that time was very sick, and she was bedridden for several years, so that I was actually a little bit of not really a single dad, because she was there, but kind of a single dad physically.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I super appreciate. My mom was gone already, but I super appreciated what my mother did then.
Mm.
Not everybody gets to realize that, so I'm fortunate that I finally got to realize that,
Yeah.
and that allows me tremendous regard for mothers of all sorts.
Yeah.
I actually have the weird habit that it embarrasses my girlfriend sometimes, but I will pass somebody on the street that's pushing a carriage,
Mm-hmm.
and I will, especially if it's a guy by himself pushing a carriage, I'll say, thanks for being a dad, because it was underappreciated when I was a kid. To me, in my world, it was underappreciated, and I think it's still underappreciated being a parent.
Yeah.
And so I do that to give them a little boost.
As
Because
kids,
their kid won't appreciate that until
Yeah.
they're 30. But
literally, but like, how can us as 30-year-olds appreciate our parents more?
well, so I'm just going to say,
Please,
and
yeah.
this is missing for many. Might not be missing for everybody, but it's missing for many.
Mm-hmm.
Is that mostly your parents, and I'm going to say in my case both,
Mm-hmm.
but usually it's even more the mother than the father. But that's a parents have usually done a lot, far more than you realize. I mean,
Yeah.
just the nights of sleep they lost, just the trouble they went to, just the worrying that they did, just the confusion that they had. Because there was 5 siblings in my family.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first, and the first gets whatever the best of your first mother's few years and all that stuff. So I had no idea that I was in my own family of 7 people. I was privileged, as opposed to my whole family being privileged, which is also true. I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
So almost nobody understands what their parents do for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. Just being aware of that, just being appreciative of that,
Mm-hmm.
that would help. I think it's hard for some people because they're criticized by their parents, or
Yeah.
they're not permitted to do something by their parents, or the other parent is better than their parents, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what other advice to give, except that, do you actually understand what your parents have done for you? Can you appreciate what they've done for you? And can you give that some weight in your conversation or time with them and so forth? It's
Yeah.
hard to do.
Comes down to the theme of the conversation that we've been discussing this whole time, is imagining, keeping an open mind and being imaginative enough to picture things
Yeah.
before they're actually happening. This robotics foundation and all the things that you got going on, man. Where can they follow your journey?
Well, they can look online to see, look up www.urbanroboticsfoundation.com. O-R-G. All one word, urbanroboticsfoundation.org.
Beauty. And if you were to ask the our audience one thing, like you've been so gracious with your time today. You spent like an hour and a half with us, sharing your stories, some perspectives, some thoughts, some questions. What would you ask of the audience?
Be better to your parents. I'm actually going to pick that one.
Beauty.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bern. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Be great.
It was quite a lot of fun. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of 100 Ways to Make 100K, the show where we're on the hunt to find 100 different ways to make 100 grand a month. That was Bern's story on how he did his first 100 in a year, 100 in a month, and 100 in a day. And like we learned, it's never really in a day, is it? But Bern, thanks so much for taking the time to share your story with us and the next generation. Once again, I'm your host, Javon.ca. I can't wait to introduce you to our next guest. So stay tuned. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. Leave us a 5-star review if you're enjoying it. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Peace.